let your life pass you by. Weep not for the memories. I'm so tired that I can't sleep, standing on the edge of something much too deep. It's funny how we feel so much but cannot say a word. We are screaming inside, oh, we can't be heard. But I will remember you. Will you remember me? Don't let your life pass you by. Weep not for the memories. So afraid to love you, more afraid to lose, clinging to a past that doesn't let me choose. Well, once there was a darkness, a deep and endless night. Gave me everything you had, you gave me life. And I will remember you. Will you remember me? Don't let your life pass you by. Weep not for the memories. I will remember you. Will you remember me? Don't let your life pass you by. Weep not for the memories. Weep not for the memories.
Would everyone please rise for the presentation of the colors and the singing of the national anthem by Mary Ross? And please, if you would join in on the singing of the national anthem.
Eight-tail, elephant, hoo! Raise it, hoo!
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight O'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Red. Huh.
Thank you. That is always impressive to me, and I really do appreciate this honor guard and the honor that it brings to our flag. Thank you for coming here tonight. This is the 7th time that we've come together. This memorial started, and we made it every year. Last year, of course, if you were here, we had a little bit of rain, I understand. I was in Kansas City, so I missed that. I want to acknowledge a few people here tonight. We're real honored to have members of the council, obviously the mayor, the city's chief administrative officer, Bruce Bender, is here. We have Colonel Paul Grimstead, came over all the way from Helena to be with us from the patrol, and Sheriff McMeekin is here. And I think Kevin Plater's here. And Kevin, are you a colonel now? With Montana Fish and Game. If I've missed anybody, we have the council here. I apologize, but it's nice to see such a vast arrangement and collection of people. I see judges here that I've never seen before outside of their official clothes. Just kidding, Ed. This memorial that we come here every year, and we honor the members of the families and the officers that are on that memorial. It serves as a reminder, not only to the families, but to the officers that are still serving. And that is of the potential cost of the ultimate price they might have to pay. So I believe that this memorial is for the fallen officers and the families, as well as those who've retired and those who still serve. As I look around here tonight, I see the officers that are retired, and I visited with a few. Darrell Johnson, Carl Ibsen, he keeps trying to retire, but I guess they won't let him. Bob Weaver. And I think that for us officers that are still serving, we owe a debt of gratitude to those guys who took stupid rookies and taught us and tried to get us on to the old age. And I think that that is an honor to the people that have already retired and those that are here. Cliff LePaine, if you thought you was getting out of it, you're not. So I do believe that we owe him a debt of gratitude for that. And as I look around and I see these officers from the different departments that are still working and still serving, I'm just amazed. And I'm amazed at their dedication. And what is it in a police officer or sheriff's deputy or fish and game or highway patrol that when there's danger, they rush in instead of rushing out? In Missoula recently, we've had several instances of barricaded armed suspects. In a 3-week period, we had 3 SWAT call-outs of that. Recently, we've had 2 officers that have been hit on duty by drunk drivers. Meth-related crimes, the violence that is related to that meth is just everyday occurrence anymore. So I wonder, why do police officers do what they do? I think I got an answer in a speech in a lecture from Bill Bennett when he was talking to the Naval Academy recently. And he said this: honor never grows old, and honor rejoices the heart of age. It does so because honor is, finally, about defending those noble and worthy things that deserve defending, even if it comes at a high cost. In our time, that may mean social disapproval, public scorn, hardship, persecution, and maybe even death. The question remains, what is worth defending? What is worth dying for? What is worth living for? Last year in the United States, 155 officers made that ultimate sacrifice. As we gather here tonight, we not only pay respect to those officers, but also to the 9 on our wall. But we must make the commitment not to be adding any more names to this wall, and just honor these people here tonight. In the last year in the Missoula Police Department, we had several officers retire, and we have a little award for them tonight. And that is from Mike Jennings and Rocky Harris, if they're here. Would you please come forward? I don't see Rocky, but Mike is one of those old guys we talk about.
You didn't know if you got one before you left, so you've now been officially bestowed the Missoula Police Coin. It's a challenge coin, so you need to keep it with you in case I decide that it's your time to buy lunch. That's my advice. Wish you well. Mike, thank you very much for all the years that you provided your experience to the Missoula Police Department, and to so many of the officers like myself that served with you. It was a grateful thank you to present you with a coin from the Missoula Police Department. I'd now like to ask Mr. Ed Christensen to come up front with me tonight for a special presentation. Seven years ago, many of us gathered right here in this park to honor the contributions of fallen officers and announce the construction of the Missoula Law Enforcement Memorial. On that evening, I had never met Ed. I had no conceivable idea of the contribution that he was going to make in the construction of this memorial. Ed has a long background in concrete construction, and he's a formidable force of friends and contacts here within the community. There were countless numbers of people in the community who had a hand in making this memorial possible. Many took their little piece and handled it faithfully. But I will tell you, Ed was so much more. He stepped forward, offering his services in coordinating the construction of this monument. There was dirt to move, foundations to form and pour, sidewalks to finish, and many other details to ready the site for the many tons of marble that were placed here. Ed found donors. He probably sold about 20% of the pavers that we see here today. He found in-kind donations of material, and I'll tell you, by my estimation, I was the treasurer behind all of this. By my estimation, Ed saved the Memorial Committee close to $30,000 in our construction of this memorial. And on top of that, he shoveled base material, he measured and hammered forms, and he supervised the crew, including his son back there, which we all know can be a difficult task. Thank you, Dean. But I'll tell you what, since I can't just write a check to Ed to repay him for the selfless contributions that he made, and he wouldn't probably cash it if I did give him one, it's fitting tonight that we present him with a token of our appreciation, some recognition for his efforts. And so we have for Ed tonight a plaque that is in appreciation of the efforts that he made to make this memorial possible and to give us a place to pay respect to those who have given the ultimate sacrifice in our line of work. Presented to Ed Christensen From the families and members of Missoula Law Enforcement, for your commitment, hard work, and enthusiasm in constructing the Missoula Law Enforcement Memorial. This monument would not have been possible without you, and there are no words to express our sincere thanks. Thank you very much, Ed. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. You're a wonderful man.
Thank you. Can I just sit in this?
Absolutely.
I'm a little bit shy on this stuff, but I don't want to take all this credit. I owe a lot of this to Mark and Lynette. We all worked together on this. And it's true, I did go out and sell a few pavers and whatnot to get started. And that just brought more enthusiasm to me. So that's when I decided, let's go ahead and construct this. So we did it. With a whole bunch of other finishers and whatnot, all donated their time too as well. We was pouring this year, there was so many finishers around here, we was stumbling over each other. So it wasn't just me that was helping the city and the police and so on and so forth. Thank you.
And this brings us to the award portion of our ceremony here this evening, where we will honor 12 officers tonight with special honors based upon incidents that they have been involved in or service that they have provided to the department. Here to help us tonight with those awards are Mayor John Engen, and to read the words that go behind what these officers did, we have invited and kindly had an acceptance of our invitation from Pete Denault to read to you the details behind each of their awards. And I will now read to you the officers' names and their awards, and when I do so, if I could have those officers proceed up here to the front, and then Pete, you can take over at the mic here. Officer Chris Kneff, Police Medal. Officer Connie Bruckner, Certificate of Commendation. Detective Mike Wood, Certificate of Commendation. Mike is unable to be here with us this evening. Detective Greg Jacobson, Certificate of Commendation. Sergeant Doug Hartzell, Meritorious Service. Detective Joe Gaffney, Meritorious Achievement. Officer J.C. Denton, Life-Saving Medal. Officer Bob Campbell, Police Medal. Sergeant Sean Paul, Police Medal. Detective Mark Blood, Medal of Valor. Sergeant Garen Wade, Medal of Valor. And Officer Rick Stevenson, Medal of Valor and Purple Star. We congratulate these outstanding officers. Pete.
Tonight's awards are presented with grateful appreciation of the citizens of Missoula and the pride of the Missoula Police Department. Missoula police officers serve with honor and esteem in the performance of their called-upon duties. This evening, we recognize those members who through various acts have distinguished themselves as rising to the highest levels of service to the community and our organization. Officer Chris Kneff, Police Medal. Tonight's award to Officer Kneff was delayed by his military deployment to Iraq and also has an interesting connection to another award being presented this evening. Back on November 24th, 2003, Officer Chris Kneff responded to an early morning domestic disturbance called in near the bus depot at Broadway and Sherwood. Confronting a male and female upon his arrival, Kneff noticed the male reaching into his pockets and ordered him to show his hands, after which he could see the male had some article in his pocket. As backup officer Jason Hunsinger arrived, the male turned and ran from the location where he and the woman had been arguing. Officer Kneff engaged in a foot chase, of the young man, who after rounding a fence line produced a handgun from his pocket and fired at Officer Kneff from about 15 feet away. The round narrowly missed Kneff, who sought concealment behind the fence corner he had just passed. Officer Huntsinger, after hearing the shot, approached with his gun drawn as the man fired a second shot in their direction, and Huntsinger was able to return fire at the running suspect, who disappeared down an alleyway. Another shot rang out as the officers moved toward the alley, and Officer Kneff radioed for additional officers to secure a perimeter around the area. Reasonably certain that the suspect was contained, K-9 and SWAT were summoned, and a search located the suspect within 2 blocks of the shooting. Nigel Ernst was found wounded, hiding near an entry of a nearby business. Officer Kneff assisted the SWAT team in making the arrest of the man who had shot at he and Officer Huntsinger. Ernst had apparently shot himself in the leg while running from the officers and had discarded drugs and his weapon, which were discovered when he was arrested. He is presently facing federal indictments for possessing those items simultaneously. Officer Huntsinger has previously been awarded the Police Medal for his actions in this incident, and tonight we recognize Officer Kneff for his show of courage in the face of an imminent and deadly threat. Even after being fired upon at least 2 times, he continued, and his clear-headed thinking contributed to the capture of a dangerous criminal. For his actions on November 24th, 2003, Officer Chris Kneff is awarded the Police Medal. Officer Connie Bruckner. The criminal justice system has its own strange sort of vortex, where sheer coincidence can't explain away the connection of certain events, like tonight's award to Officer Bruckner for off-duty actions that led to the second Missoula Police Department capture of Nigel Ernst on the evening of August 29, 2005. Officer Bruckner, traveling home from her day shift on patrol, was driving past the intersection of 7th and Catlin Streets in uniform, but in her own personal vehicle. Bruckner observed whom she believed was Ernst, a wanted fugitive at the time. Wanting to confirm the identity before further action, she pulled up to Ernst and an associate and asked directions to a church in the area. Confirming her suspicion, Connie drove to a point of observation and contacted 911. Ernst promptly left the scene, and Bruckner gave information on his direction of travel that allowed responding officers opportunity to locate the suspect vehicle. A pursuit began with Ernst and eventually ended in a vehicle crash when Ernst attempted to cross an intersection of Russell Street without stopping for traffic. Ernst attempted to flee, but was pinned down and captured. Without the particular off-duty actions of Officer Bruckner on that night, our community would have been exposed to further criminal actions by Nigel Ernst, who again was found possessing dangerous firearms, narcotics, and a significant sum of money. For her commendable willingness to protect the community by helping take this highly active criminal off the streets, Officer Connie Bruckner is awarded a certificate of commendation. Detectives Mike Wood and Greg Jacobson. Detective Wood is unable to join us this evening, and Detective Jacobson will receive both awards on their behalf. Detectives Wood and Jacobson recently brought closure to a 30-year-old homicide case of Brenda Cavalli. On the Easter weekend of 1976, Miss Cavalli was violently assaulted and murdered in her home. Her killer remained undetermined despite the efforts of investigators over the years to reinvigorate leads until science and technology advancements in the identification of DNA reached new levels. Assigned by Chief Wickman to reopen the case last year, Wood and Jacobson began to explore and revive the case, including its physical evidence. They learned that a sample of bodily fluid from a crime scene had been successfully processed for DNA. An analysis in hand, they began to seek out potential suspects, past and present, for comparison samples. Earlier this year, they identified some persons of interest and made several opportunities to collect samples from persons connected to Ms. Cavalli. A number of those samples have now cleared the names and reputations of several persons many thought could have been Brenda's killer. One of the samples collected held the answer to this lengthy mystery. Science and technology has provided the detectives with a high level of proof that the killer was indeed a man whom Brenda knew well. In fact, it was a man whom many in law enforcement knew as well. The suspected killer took his own life just a day after giving his DNA sample, and within weeks, the genetic fingerprint was determined to match that of the killer. Detective Wood and Jacobson's efforts to bring closure to this case brought considerable relief to surviving family members around the country who were unaware the investigation was reopened. Their perseverance yielded results and serves as a reminder to our professional the impact we have on the community through our efforts to solve crimes. Tonight we recognize their efforts by awarding Detectives Greg Jacobson and Mike Wood with certificates of commendation. Sergeant Doug Hartzell, Meritorious Service Award. Sergeant Doug Hartzell has distinguished himself and his career with the Missoula Police Department while serving 15 years on the SWAT team. Doug served on the team from 1980 to 1995 in roles as an operator, instructor, and team leader. As an early member of a developing team, Doug took on the burden and expense of getting training outside his regular work obligations from teams like Los Angeles SWAT. He would bring back cutting-edge methods and technology in the field of special weapons and tactics to share with his fellow team members. While his ability to creatively procure equipment was always recognized, his most memorable was probably the Ogre, one good eye roller, shield, and light deployment system. Doug researched, designed, and assisted in the construction of this device, which the team affectionately named after him. Doug's worthiest attribute and contribution was his dedication to the team and his personal commitment to its success. While no longer an active member, his legacy lives on and his contributions will not be forgotten. For his exceptional commitment to the Missoula Police Department and the Missoula Police Department SWAT team, Sergeant Doug Hartzell is tonight presented with the Medal for Meritorious Service. Detective Joe Gaffney. Meritorious Achievement Award. On June 22, 2004, an unidentified male body was located floating in the irrigation canal west of the University of Montana. The victim was identified as Stephen Rodriguez, a Missoula resident. The cause of death was not immediately known, and the Missoula Police Department assigned Detective Joe Gaffney to investigate the unattended death. The preliminary autopsy by the medical examiner revealed Rodriguez had suffered a significant beating prior to death, and cause of death was ruled as drowning. Detective Gaffney learned through relatives that some personal items were apparently taken from the victim, namely his boots, wallet, and a ring. Gaffney was now investigating a robbery homicide, and efforts were taken to find the scene of the crime along the banks of the irrigational canals upstream of the recovery site. Using records of police contacts with transient males frequenting these areas, Gaffney learned of a young man named Kevin Oldhorn who had recently been arrested for fighting with some other transients. Gaffney went to the detention center and interviewed Oldhorn, who denied knowing Rodriguez. Gaffney interviewed potential witnesses, several of whom implicated Oldhorn, Andrew Grable, and John Matt as being responsible for Rodriguez's death. 3 days following the discovery of the body, Gaffney re-interviewed Kevin Oldhorn, who made admissions to his involvement. He implicated Grable and Matt to the homicide, indicating it began as a beating associated with a robbery and culminated in a drowning. During the investigation, pawn records were located indicating that the boots taken from Rodriguez were pawned and that the money was used by John Matt to purchase alcohol. An attempt to locate was put out for Matt. On July 1st, patrol officers located Matt and he was interviewed by Detective Gaffney. Though Matt insisted he was passed out during the beating, he implicated Oldhorn and Grable as involved in the incident. John Matt and Kevin Oldhorn were the two first charged in the deliberate homicide of Stephen Rodriguez. Later that same day, Andrew Grable turned himself in and by the conclusion of his interview had confessed to participating in the beating, robbery, and drowning death of Rodriguez. He became the third individual charged with deliberate homicide. The results of Detective Gaffney's efforts culminated in the successful prosecution of all three of these men for the senseless killing of Stephen Rodriguez. On December 2nd, 2004, Andrew Grable pled guilty to deliberate homicide. On April 12, 2005, after a 5-day trial, William Matt was found guilty of deliberate homicide by a jury. On September 23, 2005, Kevin Oldhorn pled guilty to deliberate homicide. These three convictions resulted from professional and competent investigation, which withstood defense motions, suppression hearings, and trial. The results provided a measure of closure for the family and a sense of security to the community. An investigation such as this requires considerable multitasking and delegation abilities from the lead investigator. Detective Gaffney performed his job in an exemplary fashion and successfully resolved the case involving the taking of one individual's life by another in a criminal act. Nominated for this award by his fellow detectives, Joe clearly demonstrated to his peers and the organization that he is worthy of the Meritorious Achievement Award we bestow upon him this evening. Officer J.C. Denton, Life Saving Award. In the early morning hours of June 7, 2005, Officer Denton heard that a medical was being dispatched to a resident in South Missoula for a 64-year-old male not breathing. Officer Denton responded and arrived first on the scene. The victim, who was an insulin-dependent diabetic, was unresponsive and not breathing. Using his medical emergency training, he assessed the situation and began immediately to administer CPR to the man. He continued to assist arriving medical personnel in resuscitating the patient and prepared him for transport to the hospital where the man recovered from the life-threatening incident. For his prompt response and action in providing life-saving care to a Missoula citizen, Officer J.C. Denton is awarded the Life Saving Medal. Officer Bob Campbell, Police Medal. Sergeant Sean Paul, Police Medal. Detective Mark Blood, Medal of Valor. Detective Sergeant Garen Wade, Medal of Valor. Officer Rick Stevenson, Medal of Valor. Officer Rick Stevenson, also the Purple Star. April 13, 2005 was destined to be an interesting shift for two new officer trainees at the Missoula Police Department. For every cop, there's so much to learn and experience in the first days, weeks, and months that you take it for granted You'll see new things on a regular basis. Little did these two know that they would both witness their field trainers and other veteran officers engaged in a deadly encounter. That began as a hit-and-run crash around 10 minutes to 4 that April afternoon. A man driving a Nissan pickup rear-ended another vehicle on Broadway near the Federal Building and fled the scene, eventually abandoning the run vehicle near the United Building Center building on South 3rd. Police responded when the victim of the hit-and-run located the abandoned vehicle and an investigation was begun. The registered owner of the Nissan had a $30,000 warrant for his arrest on another issue. Just before 5 p.m., a witness reported that a man had returned to the abandoned truck and was taking items from inside. Missoula police officers responded to the area and began looking for this man, who left on a bicycle and was now carrying a backpack taken from the truck. Several blocks to the north, Officer Gordon Schmill was the first to gain sight of the suspect, and he called in a pursuit with the subject, which brought other officers converging on the area. Sergeant Sean Paul was the next to arrive and put eyes on the suspect running from Schmill across the railroad tracks carrying his bicycle. Sergeant Paul radioed for others to set up a perimeter in this area of Hickory Street. After dumping his mountain bike along the railroad line, the suspect entered a dry irrigation ditch and fled east toward Hickory Street. As Detective Sergeant Wade arrived and met Sergeant Paul on a Hickory Street bridge spanning the empty ditch, a nearby witness called out to the officers and said the man had run beneath them under the bridge. No one present expected what was to occur over the next few minutes. Sergeants Paul and Wade, both members of the department's tactical team, had taken up positions on either side of the bridge deck, and when Paul tried to get a visual under the bridge, a shot rang out. Soon radios across the county crackled with that dreaded phrase, "Shots fired." Field Training Officer Mark Blood and his trainee, Kurt Trowbridge, arrived next and took up positions to help cover the others already hemming in the suspect. Blood was covering the west side of the bridge abutment while Sergeant Wade circled around a building to get a visual from a position of cover. While Wade repositioned, Field Training Officer Rick Stevenson and his trainee, Craig Serba, arrived on the scene. Stevenson's first glimpse of the incident was Officer Blood moving down into the dry ditch. The suspect had begun to move under the bridge, exposing himself to Blood, who now had to confront the armed male. Stevenson's patrol rifle in hand scrambled to the ditch as he heard Blood shouting commands to the suspect, and without regard for his own safety, Stevenson dropped down into the ditch to provide assistance. Just as he entered, the suspect swung his own handgun from Blood to Stevenson and began firing. Serber, just 10 minutes into his first shift as a Missoula police officer, was ordered to remain atop the ditch bank and witnessed as Blood and Stevenson returned fire at the suspect. Sergeant Wade was now approaching from down the ditch and helplessly watched as his fellow officers took and returned fire from the suspect. He saw Stevenson fall to the ground in the ditch bottom as the gunfire subsided, and he continued his approach to give aid. Seeing that the suspect still had a pistol in his hand resting atop his thigh, Stevenson was down, hit by 2 rounds from the suspect's pistol. One leg wound and another stopped by his ballistic vest, directly above his left breast pocket. Sergeant Wade ordered the suspect to drop his weapon, but the man raised his pistol once again, and both Wade and Blood were forced to fire on the man again. This time, the suspect slumped to the ground and remained motionless, later determined to have died from multiple gunshot wounds. All the officers present remained focused on their duties at hand. Sergeant Paul and Officer Serba pulled Stevenson from the ditch. Paul then disarmed the suspect and checked for signs of life, finding none. Officers arriving on the scene provided first aid to Stevenson and summoned medical aid, never forgetting their duty to protect the scene of this deadly encounter. Stevenson was hospitalized for 3 days, but was amazingly back at work within just a few months. Officer Bob Campbell was on the scene when Officers Blood, Stevenson, and Wade exchanged fire with the suspect. Officer Campbell recognized the danger to a citizen he was speaking to at the time and used his body to shield and protect her from being struck by any gunfire. When the exchange of gunfire ended, Campbell was then one of the officers to make immediate action to render aid to Stevenson, literally using the shirt off his back as a temporary dressing for the leg wound. A coroner's jury convened on August 3, 2005. It ruled the officer's action is justified in the shooting death of Justin Banta. We will likely never know why Banta, who died before his 31st birthday, chose to fire upon these police officers on April 13th. Banta had some recent contact with police and was having relationship problems and troubled by depression. What we do know is that Officer Mark Blood, Officer Rick Stevenson, and Sergeant Garen Wade all performed with valor under fire and summoned the courage to win when confronted with extreme risk and the need to protect themselves and each other from the harmful intent of Banta. Along with other members of the Missoula Police Department, whose exemplary service, the community, these officers, and many others responding that day performed admirably in a tense and chaotic situation. They also demonstrated why they all have served as field training officers, past and present, with such success. Certainly officers Trowbridge and Serba will never forget those first days on the street. This incident has changed all the officers' lives forever, but each of them has returned to work with the same quality and enthusiasm they had before the shooting. Tonight we recognize Officer Bob Campbell and Sergeant Sean Paul with the Police Medal for their demonstrated gallantry and dedication to protect citizens and their fellow officers in the course of duty. The Medal of Valor is the highest and most rarely awarded decoration given by the Missoula Police Department. The deed for which the Medal of Valor is awarded must have been one of personal bravery or self-sacrifice so conspicuous as to clearly distinguish the officer and usually involves risk of life. Our recipients tonight have clearly done so and are worthy of this award. Tonight we recognize Detective Sergeant Garen Wade, Detective Mark Blood, and Officer Rick Stevenson with the Medal of Valor. And for being wounded in the line of duty, Officer Rick Stevenson also receives the award of the Purple Star. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in congratulating these officers tonight.
Thank you, guys. Our program continues now with the keynote address tonight by Mayor Ingen, and I think we've been real lucky to have Mayor Ingen as our boss, as our leader, as a mayor. Everyone knows of his support for law enforcement. So, with that, I'll just turn it over to you, sir.
You know, if you all can hear me okay, I think I'll forego the microphone. Is that okay? Can you hear okay? Good, thank you. You know, podiums tend to block the view of me, and that's important for you to be able to see. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a privilege to stand among you on this beautiful Missoula evening as we honor the commitment of men and women whose lives were lost preserving peace and securing our safety. My remarks this evening are part statistics and part soul. We'll begin with the statistics. There are more than 970,000 sworn law enforcement officers now serving in the United States. It's the highest figure ever. About 11% of those serving are women. In 2004, there were more than 1.36 million violent crimes committed in the United States, and the annual number of violent crimes has declined by 35% since peaking in 1993 at about 4 million. Crime fighting has taken its toll. Since the first recorded police death in 1792, there have been more than 17,000 law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. Today, there are 17,535 names engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. A total of 1,635 law enforcement officers died in the line of duty during the past 10 years, an average of one death every 53 and a half hours, or 163 deaths per year. There were 155 law enforcement officers killed in 2005. On average, more than 56,000 law enforcement officers are assaulted each year, resulting in more than 16,000 injuries. The deadliest day in law enforcement history was September 11, 2001, when 72 officers were killed while responding to terrorist attacks in New York City and elsewhere. There are 210 female officers listed on the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. But closer to home, ladies and gentlemen, 100 sworn police officers served the city of Missoula. During the last year or so, these officers responded to more than 40,000 calls for help from our community. They've written traffic tickets and saved lives. They've served kids in our public schools and helped a mom keep the heat on in her home in the dead of winter. They've done bailiff duty, propped up drunks, busted drug dealers, and intervened when men hit women. They've been kicked, cussed at, pushed and shoved, insulted and injured, all in the name of service. They've seen the worst of our nature, and almost without fail, their better nature always prevails. More often than not, when I meet a Missoula police officer, we end up smiling about something. In a serious world with big problems, we can make small talk. So we move from statistics, ladies and gentlemen, to soul. The men and women who elect to serve as peace officers make a unique choice every working day. Am I going to put myself in harm's way for the greater good? Depending on what happened the shift before, that question is harder or easier to answer. But it's the question that's always there. And again, and again, and again, these folks answer yes. And that answer requires courage, heart, brains, and soul. Tonight we celebrate that soul, that spirit of service, that commitment to community with medals and commendations for the officers among us. And we celebrate that soul, that spirit of service, that commitment to community by remembering those officers who sacrificed their lives for the greater good. I'm very proud of the women and men of the Missoula Police Department, and I am grateful, as is their community, for their service. This evening I thank them and their families for serving our citizens. And I thank the men and women who serve on behalf of the Missoula County Sheriff's Office, the Montana Highway Patrol, and other law enforcement agencies. And thank you all for joining us in this celebration and memorial this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed an honor and a privilege to be with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Would the people placing roses please go to the designated area right now? Each year we place a single red rose at this law enforcement memorial in honor of those officers who have paid this ultimate price and to honor their families. James Thompson, Missoula Sheriff's Department. Edmund Trudeau, Missoula Sheriff's Department. Paul A. Reed, Treasury Agent. Lyle Ward, Missoula Sheriff's Department. Lloyd Stringer, Missoula Sheriff's Department. Roy Thompson, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. Donald Gregory, Missoula City Police. Stephen LePaine, Missoula City Police. Alan Kimmery, Missoula Sheriff's Department.
A couple of months ago when Lynette called in to talk about this year's music, out of nowhere she says, why don't you just write a song? And I thought, can I kill you now or later? But all that came out of my mouth was, okay, I'll think about it. And I did. I thought about it incessantly. Steve and I, my husband, discussed the trials, tribulations, and joys of his career as a police officer. And over, this one thought remained with me, this one thing I wanted to say to all of you. To the officers who are here tonight and to the fallen officers, you are heroes. You are regular men and women with regular lives and families who have had a kernel of greatness deposited inside of you. You see so much darkness, deal with so many intense situations that I'm afraid you sometimes forget who you are and who your fallen comrades were. I want you to remember that few people are truly called to this profession, but you are. I want you to remember that while those who are breaking the law have a healthy fear of you, little children look up to you in awe and wonder. I want you to remember that every day you impact lives in a way no one else ever will. I want you to remember why you chose this profession, that you are honorable, that your heart is good, and that you are a hero. You were patrolling one day through the neighborhood, looking around just like always, when you saw the little boy on his big wheel in the street. So you pulled over so you and he could meet, and you said, hey son, what you doing out here in the street? Does your mom know this is where you're playing? And he said, oh no, and his face grew whiter than a sheet. So you talked with him a while, till you finally made him smile. And for years you had a friend that you saw time and time again. But it started with the boy on the big wheel. You heard the call come through one day. A little girl wandered away. She was oh so young, the same age as your son. You saw her in the water, you pulled her to the shore. You did all you could, but then you did some more. And you said, breathe child, I won't give up, come on sweetheart, breathe. Then a cough came and you started crying. And she said, where's dad? I'm scared, I want to go home. So you talked with her a while, till you finally made her smile. And for years you had a friend that you saw time and time again. But it started with the girl who wandered. And over all the years, you've cried so many tears. And even when your life was on the line, you calmed our fears. I'm sorry we didn't say thank you every day for the nights away from home, all
when we saw a young man and a pretty girl standing by the gravesite, and this is what we heard. He said, I remember when I met you. Do you remember too? Just a kid out playing in the street. And she said, I still remember when you saved my life. Then you talked with us a while till you finally made her smile. And for years we had a friend that we saw time and time again. But it started with you, our hero. And over all the years, you've dried so many tears. And even when your life was on the line, you calmed our fears. I'm sorry we didn't say thank you every day. Thank you, that you cared enough to give all you had that we might live, that you always were around, you never let us down. For all you are to us, our hero. Thank you. You are 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 our hero.
Thank you, Mary. Wonderful. You know, as I stand here tonight and as we get ready to close, we all know that we have armed forces around the world that are in harm's way. Tonight, Chris Kneff showed up in his Army fatigues because he was on duty when we called him away from this. I'm getting the sign. I don't have a bigger voice as John, I guess. So at this time, I'd like us to take just a moment, bow our heads for a moment of silence for our armed forces around the world also. Okay, thank you. And now as we are getting ready to close, I would ask that everyone stand as the colors are retired.
Detail, ahead, move! Detail, who's that? Huh! Order! Huh! Detail, who's that? Huh! Afraid. Huh.
Okay, that'll conclude our ceremony tonight. Thank everyone for coming here, and let's keep the wall bare. Let's not add any more names to this wall.